Okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I'm excited for this conversation because it's so frightening in some ways. Why don't you guys start by introducing yourself? Torbjörn.
My name is Torbjörn Holmström. I'm the senior advisor when it comes to research and technology at the Volvo Group, which is the commercial side of the Volvo. It's not the passenger cars. I've been the CTO for the Volvo Group for many, many years, and since half a year now, I'm working with the CEO and talking about research and technology. So I'm talking about it now. I did it for 20 years then in the past.
All right. Malavika.
Hi, I'm Malavika Jairam. I'm the executive director of a very new think tank called the Digital Asia Hub, which was incubated by the Berkman Center for Internet and Society at Harvard. And we're in Hong Kong. And we investigate a lot of issues at the intersection of technology and society. So things like artificial intelligence, freedom of speech, ICTs, innovation, and various ways in which technology can help or hinder innovation and society.
Okay.
So I'll be the scary one. I'm the lawyer.
Well, Torbjörn, can you tell us a little bit about what Volvo is doing specifically with trucks, these big heavy industry stuff, and then maybe branch out a little bit and talk about what the state of play is with the technology?
I will. I mean, we are one of the, to begin with, we are one of the three biggest groups then when it comes to commercial vehicles in the world. It's ourselves, the Volvo Group, and it's the Daimler Group and the Volkswagen Group that are the big ones. And all of us, we are working with, let's say, the new technology that is coming or the new trends that are on the way. It's definitely then electrification of the system. It is automation and it is connectivity. And if you put automation and connectivity together, and what you probably have heard about a lot then when it comes to autonomous vehicles that are creating a tremendous amount of data. And one of the things that we are working very hard with is to secure the data and how to treat all that data. Today we have some 600,000 vehicles connected, producing data every single minute. And there is a lot of sensitive data in those vehicles. So for us it's extremely important that no one is hacking our systems. And it will be a challenge then going forward when you will use then the cloud as a computing power, so to say, to steer the vehicle. Today we have the vehicle in itself has all the computing power then to do, I would say, the automatic system that we have today, because we started some 20, 30 years ago then atomizing the engine operation, the transmission operation, the braking system, and the steering system. So I mean the platform is there. So we have been looking into that for many, many years. And our colleagues then in the industry are working with the same thing. Today we have completely, or testing completely atomized vehicles then in confined areas. And why do we do that? We do it because it is a way then to learn without then having the hustle then to discuss, and right now then at least then being involved in all the legal framework that is needed to really drop an autonomous vehicles into the public domain, like here in Hong Kong or whatever. But we need to test, we need to talk about it, and we need to get the discussion up and running in the public domain. The lawmakers and everyone needs to think about how do we regulate this. What are the rules when it comes to data and security at large then when it comes to autonomous vehicles and connectivity?
So Malavika, what do you think the lawmakers should be focusing on policy-wise? Fleets of giant trucks driving around with no humans inside. There's a lot of things that could go wrong with that, right?
Yeah. I think what's really interesting is we focus a lot on the autonomous part when it comes to the vehicle, without worrying as much about the autonomy part when it comes to the individuals involved. So I think that sort of interplay between privacy and security and efficiency and safety when it comes to vehicles, congestion, urban planning, and all the good things that can come out of autonomous vehicles. I think that balance is something that policymakers will be really interested in. And usually my job at these kinds of events is sort of bringing up the data issue, so it's wonderful that that's what you started with, because it's usually the bit that nobody wants to talk about. It's the awkward, oh yeah, we'll figure it out. Some lawyer will sort of automatically compute for that. Like engineers don't need to think about it, but I think if it's not baked into the design and the frameworks and the architecture, if it's not privacy by design upfront, it's not something you can bolt on at the end. If a system is built to be data hungry and to collect information upfront, it's very hard to sort of anonymize it after the fact. So I think the data questions are very central to this. I think the liability is also super interesting because, as with most things involving technology, it's done in silos. It depends on which jurisdiction you're in. And it presents both opportunities and risks, because some countries or even states will be drivers of innovation, will say we'll allow autonomous vehicles in controlled pilots. We'll allow the Uber in Philadelphia. There are examples of places that want to be leaders in this space, so they're going to compete on that. But equally, there are countries that are going to compete from a legal and policy point of view to actually, like Japan is coming up with really interesting policies around this. So I think even though a lot of the vehicle manufacturers and the industry is very keen to say, leave us alone, don't regulate because you're going to kill innovation, I think given the safety involved, I think there's going to be a lot. It's optically and legally, it's going to be difficult not to intervene in some way. So I think even if you want light touch regulation, it might be guidelines, best practices, ethical frameworks, rather than law and regulation as such. And I think that's where the industry is going.
We are already thinking about that. I mean, in the European Union, there is talks about the right to be forgotten.
Exactly.
Let's say that you have a truck then that 10 different drivers are operating.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, one of the drivers said, okay, I want the right to be forgotten. And you have been driving them for 3-4 years. And all the data that has been collected by me, I want, please erase that. It is an issue for us then to see that is possible to be done.
I think interoperability will also require some kind of frameworks at, if not a global level, at least, some kind of standardized way, because with the old sort of analog car, which is a distinct, thing in and of itself, which isn't connected to other cars and to other systems, it's autonomous in a very different way. Data is not being shared. Nobody else needs to know where the car is at any point. You don't need to sort of plan around this vehicle and where it's going. But I think, so, car manufacturers could come up with completely different systems that didn't talk to each other, that didn't follow the same standards. I think the second you have different brands and different cars on the same streets in a city, which need to communicate with each other, it requires some kind of interface protocol, some kind of standard that will apply to all of them.
Well, isn't that a major industry risk? Because you're talking about automotive, which is a global industry, a lot of exports, and obviously China is a huge market, and they've got a very different attitude towards information security than compared to some other jurisdictions.
Yeah.
I mean, is it realistic to expect governments to establish some sort of, I don't know, body that would administer standards and deal with these issues, or is it completely fragmented?
We are a little bit burned by that. If you take the emission standards, global emission standards are not standardized all over. Yeah. Different countries have different level of emission standards. They are measuring it in different ways. Unfortunately, I don't foresee that it will be a complete standard on how to communicate between vehicles and infrastructure, vehicle to individuals and so on. So that will be an issue for us then to handle going forward, because there are so many, the issue is that there are so many good things that could be done with a new technology. But at the same time, there is a risk then, because you share so much data. Let's say that we would like them to have a safe environment here in Hong Kong. So we need to know if there is the pedestrian around the corner coming out in front of the truck or whatever. Of course, we have to know where that pedestrian, the pedestrians are, so to say. So, and that is, of course, they need to share their data, the location data. I don't know how many of you have your location data and the frequent location turned on your mobile phones. But if someone hacks your phone, there will be a lot of data where you have been then the last week or the last month and so on. So which is a risk, of course. It must be hacker-proof, so to say.
I think one of the other issues that comes up in this space a lot is transparency and scrutability, because I think as you're using artificial intelligence, techniques of machine learning, deep learning, I think one of the problems is software is writing software that's writing software that's learning from data. You know, you have reinforcement learning, you have different technologies where it's very hard for one developer or a set of developers to even say, this is how decisions are being made.
Yeah.
So, you know, you often have the trolley problem, which is the sort of poster child in this space of all the things that could go wrong and how humans might make decisions differently than technology would. And I think the trolley problem can be very reductive, but it's a very good entry point into the kind of ethical questions that humans make. And we can't explain our own decisions or our reflexes very, you know, well to people. So the expectation that technology will somehow be better at this could be unrealistic. But unless we have some way of making systems and algorithms scrutable, even if you don't want to disclose the secret sauce, which no company will want to do, I think the fact that you have some way of independently auditing this, because, I mean, this is another terrible Swedish example, but it keeps coming up in the literature of what if the car has an inbuilt thing of, you know, like when you're browsing things online, it could take you to different sites or be advertising at you. What is the physical location equivalent of that? Will your car drive you past IKEA or drive you past a particular store?
Okay.
You know, and that's something that comes up saying, what is going to be presented to you physically? What kind of routes are going to be chosen to optimize for certain things rather than others? And do you even know that that's happening? So I think transparency is huge.
I mean, what is the problem, like if you're talking about a global problem, say poverty or hunger or something, what is the problem that automating fleets of trucks and cars is going to solve? I know it's going to make people money, but just to be totally, like what is the upside for what you're doing in terms of society?
Let's take the productivity of, let's say, the trucking system. Let's say if you have platooning, if you have many trucks behind each other, and you just have a driver in front. If they go close, you could reduce the carbon dioxide footprint between 15 to 20% if you do that. And then you, of course, you could have one driver for maybe 3, 4, 5 different trucks. So that is one simple productivity gain that you could do. And of course, you could run the vehicles much more frequent. Today, in Europe, you can drive 4.5 hours, then you have to rest 45 minutes, and then you can drive 4.5 hours again. I mean, you don't need to rest a vehicle like that. You could just run it all the time then and utilize then the installed capacity much, much better. So there is productivity gains both for the individual ones that are owning the truck, but also for society at large, because you could reduce environmental impact. It's one thing that you could do.
Well, so, I mean, on the flip side, of course, I've used the word poverty, and you have these technologies coming into poorer economies, developing economies, where presumably, like, being a truck driver is a job. You know, these things are, you know, and they've also got the liability issues that we spoke about, you know, in terms of if you get hit by one of these cars because you don't have a cell phone at all, and so the automation doesn't see you because you're poor and you can't afford a cell phone. I mean, what are the benefits for developing economies, or is this something that's going to flow more upwards to capitalists and upper middle class people?
I think with developing economies, the use case is huge, because if you look at the statistics around, you know, traffic-related deaths in the developing world, they're ridiculous. They shouldn't be that high. I mean, I come from India, and like if you look at accidents and road traffic and the number of lives lost every year, that's something that could really be helped by automation and self-driving cars. Because even now when you look at the tests, things go wrong usually when there's human intervention, even with self-driving cars.
For sure.
So I think there's a huge gain there. But the thing is, unlike, say, drones, where, you know, the civilian use case is so developed you can buy them for less than $100 now, cars are still going to be super expensive, and it's something that the developing world isn't quite there yet in terms of using.
Right.
So, and I think that's going to pose really interesting issues when you have some autonomous cars on the road with regular cars being driven by, I hate to say it, but, you know, people who drive really badly in certain countries. When I moved back from London to India, one of my friends told me that I was a huge liability because I drove well. And he said for a system to work, either everybody drives terribly or everyone follows the rules. Someone like you is going to screw up everything because you're following the rules and using indicator lights in a field where nobody else does. You're going to cause jams. So
that is an issue, and human beings never follow the rules completely, but the autonomous vehicle would do completely.
Well, but so how is AI going to cope for that? Because part of the artificial intelligence you put in there presumably would be having to account for imperfection. Like I can't see a scenario where there's 100% automated vehicles out there in an
today there are massive of people then trying then to figure out what you see through a LiDAR system. Is that a moose coming out backwards on a motorway, or is it something else than trying then to identify what it is and to learn, I mean, the system, what they really see. And that is a huge undertaking to do that, and there is many steps. So the vehicle itself must be so smart so that they don't do something stupid in itself.
Every time I worry about the risks of something like autonomous vehicles, I'm really comforted by the fact that algorithms still can't distinguish between cupcakes and chihuahuas.
Right.
And there are like fantastic images and GIFs on this, and so I think we're not there yet.
But it sounds like for it to work, they're going to need to. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, just do you find that which is further? What I'm hearing is that the technology is far in advance of the policy environment around it. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, so is it? Just go back. Like, is there a need for some sort of centralized think tank that starts dealing with these in a serious ways? Because certainly there's a risk of.
I think when we are talking to European Union and US and so on, they are already thinking about how should we make this legal in one way or another. What are the boundary conditions then for autonomous vehicles and connectivity and so on? So that is ongoing. But I mean, the technology is a little bit ahead now compared to the legal framework.
And there is a Geneva Convention on road traffic, but it assumes that the driver is always human. So there are a lot of governments that have been calling for amendments to the Geneva Convention to account for non-human agents.
All right, well, look forward to seeing how they revise it. And that is time. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks.